Hello, testing, testing. Trying out the tech for the first time, my very first YouTube Live. So we will hang out for a couple minutes and let some people get on, and then I will start creating cute little cards for today. Happy New Year, everyone, whoever's watching. 2021, finally. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. New beginnings are always good. We're just going to wait a couple minutes. Feel free to chat amongst yourselves in the chat. I'll repeat this again a little bit later, but if you have questions for me, go ahead and you can try putting them in the chat. I might see them, I might not. But if you ask me the questions in the YouTube comments, I will absolutely answer every single question after the video gets saved to YouTube. So just hanging out and waiting to see what's happening before I get started. If you're here, if you're watching, say hi. Say howdy, howdy. We'll go ahead and get started. It's always awkward, even when I watch other folks do lives. This is that awkward time at the beginning where you're waiting for people to show up. Hi Eric, hi Michael. Michael. Thanks for joining in. Okay. Well, without further ado. Oh, hi Jenny from Sweden. That's awesome. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm Lady Michelle, by the way.
Sweden.
In case you didn't know, in case you haven't seen my face anywhere on my Facebook page or on YouTube, so that's me. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on this card. And like I said, if you have questions, you can throw them in the chat. I might be able to look back while I'm creating to see if you have some questions. Otherwise, if you for sure want your questions answered, go ahead and put them in the YouTube comments, and then I will answer them there at the end for sure. So to start, again, Happy New Year. Thanks for joining me. I was going to make a card or make a video for this card that I'm about to do right now, so I thought I might as well just do it live. And then if you have questions or, just want to hang out with me, we can do that. So I'm going to get rid of my face, and I'm going to go over here to my studio area and start making a card. So bear with me a second. Okay. So I'm going to make some little square cards today with this Simon Says stamp set. It's called Heart Animals. It's got these super cute little critters, and I've been doing, if you've been watching, recently I've been doing a masculine series, and so I was thinking these would be great with these two little dogs. Would be great for little boys. But I'm actually going to do birthday cards instead of Valentine's cards, which I think this is for. So it's this little stamp set, and then it comes with the heart die and then the little I love you. So I'm going to start with that. But we're going to do some watercoloring on the backgrounds, and I'm going to use some watercolor pencils. So I'm going to start with some Canson watercolor paper. Now this is the watercolor paper that I use all the time. It's fairly inexpensive. I just get it at Michael's. Or Hobby Lobby, wherever they sell Canson, and it comes in a big, like a 9x12. They come in great big giant sheets, and then I just cut them down to this 4x6 size or 4.5x6 size, and they work out perfect. That way I can make a big watercolor painting and then cut it out down to the size that I want, and I've got a nice clean border. And then I just keep it in these little plastic bags for easy reference. So I'm going to start by putting the cardstock or the watercolor paper in my MISTI. Now, normally I would use baby powder. If I was going to do like heat emboss a background on here, I would use baby powder because it covers the texture of the watercolor paper better, and it keeps the static off better. But I'm just going to go ahead and use my little anti-static powder bag. And by the way, all of these supplies, there's a link to all of the supplies in the description that will take you to my blog, and I put all the things that I'm using in that list today. So I'm just gonna do this little guy and this little guy. I'm gonna cut these out after I watercolor them, so it doesn't really matter how they're on here. And then I'm just going to use VersaFine Onyx Black ink. This is a pigment ink, so it's a little bit thicker than the water-based inks, and it stays wet longer, and then that helps my embossing powder stick to it better. That's why I use the VersaFine. I managed to get it all over the door in my MISTI. And check it, make sure that's a good impression. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to heat emboss this with clear embossing ink. What that does is it does two things. It makes the black a little bit shiny, but the main reason I do it is because it actually makes like a little bit of a ridge or a little wall, kind of, that keeps the watercolor in its place. So you can be a little bit messy and it doesn't really ruin your image because it's a little border of a raised heat embossing powder. Well, you'll see what I mean when I do it. So I'm going to go ahead and heat this up. You want to be sure and warm up your heat gun before you put it to the paper, because that helps minimize the warping. It's still going to warp a little bit though. It's just the nature of heat and paper. And then I just check it to make sure it's shiny everywhere. It looks pretty shiny. Okay, and then I use these little deli sheets because they're really, really inexpensive, and they've got this pre-made seam in the middle right here. Makes it easy to put my embossing powder back. Plus I can use them over and over again. It's kind of a waxy finish, so the powder comes off easy. That's why I use those. And then I'm going to use that powder again a little bit later, so I'm just setting that aside. I'm going to clean off my stamps in a minute. This is just a stamp chamois from, I don't know if that's what it's called, but it's from Gina K. It's just a little thing that helps take that ink off of there. And I just keep mine in a plastic bag. I don't have a fancy container for it or anything. I'll put these back real quick. And that's it for the stamp set. I am going to use the dies. I'll come back to those, and I'm going to set this aside. I'm going to use that again too. So now I'm going to watercolor. So what I'm going to use today is some Dr. P.H. Martin's Hydrus Fine Art watercolor paints. I like these because they're really, really vibrant. the pigment in them is crazy vibrant. Plus, you don't need very much. I mean, I am like literally going to use 2 drops of each one, and I won't use it all. And I'm using the 3 primary colors, yellow, red, and blue, because it's like we learned in kindergarten. Those colors all kind of play well together. Yellow and red make orange, red and blue make purple, yellow and blue make green. So if they mix together, you won't have a lot of muddy areas, basically. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see this better. Maybe a little bit more. A little bit more. There we go. Okay, I'm also going to use 2 different kinds of watercolor pencils. I have 2 of these woodless ones. These are by Altenew. It comes in a set of 24. A little bit on the pricier side, but they're nice because they don't have wood in them. So when you sharpen them, you're just sharpening the actual pencil lead. So there's no waste really. And I'm also using these, and I'm not sure how to say that. I think it's Staedtler watercolor pencils. These are just like student grade. They're not expensive. They also come in a set of 24. I just wanted a gray and a tan, and the Altenew ones didn't have the colors that I wanted. So I'm using those 2, and then I'm going to use a watercolor brush. I'll show you how to use that. And then I have 2 just watercolor paint brushes. They're silver black velvet. They hold a lot of water and they make a really fine point. I really like those. So now I just need to decide if I'm going to color the critters first or do the back. I think I'm going to color the critters first because they will dry quicker, and we'll do the backgrounds after. So I'm just going to make color in this first little dog. The nice thing about watercolor pencils is that you don't need to be good at any of it. I am so impressed by these artists that can use Copic markers. It's just astounding to me what they can do. I'm not that person at all. I'm an abstract artist, and for me less is more with everything. So I'm just not good at all of the shading and all of that. So using these watercolor pencils, it makes my life so much easier. So I'm just going to use a water brush because it's with these watercolor pencils, using a water brush is a lot easier to control the amount of water that you're using. And basically all I'm doing, can we see this? Maybe I should zoom in a little bit more. All I'm doing is sort of melting that pigment that I put down, and then I'm using the water to push the color around in the shape. And I really am just coloring. There's nothing fine art about this at all. Now I did put the color where I kind of want it to be darker, because the more water that I use, the thinner or the lighter the color. Can you see that? So if I want his cheeks and the sides of his head to be a little bit lighter than the rest, then I just use more water there. And then I'll take this up here on his forehead, kind of melt it and drag it down. Do the same thing for his ears. What's nice is that the water melts the pigment down, or the crayon or the pencil, so it doesn't have that kind of crayon-y, pencil-y look. It smooths it right out. It looks like you painted it with paint. Then you can wipe the excess color off of your brush on paper towel, like I'm doing right here. See, isn't he cute? Oh my goodness. And it was so easy. I mean, I barely even used any pencil at all. So I think I'm going to use this lighter one in here on his nose. Again, underneath, I'm just imagining that the light's coming from this way a little bit. Upper left. Just a little. I mean, nothing fancy. There. Now this little guy, I have a feeling that this could be a kitty cat or a dog, but I'm going to make him a dog because I'm a dog person. I like dogs. So I'm going to do his little eyes in gray. Again, where I want the color to be the darkest, that's where I'm putting the pencil. And then I'm going to use this gold color to do the same thing here. I'm going to do underneath his nose. Maybe a little bit right there. Make sure there's no brown. Now I will say with these two different kinds of watercolor pencils that the Staedtler pencils, the student pencils, they move a little bit easier than the Altenew ones. Not that that's a good thing or a bad thing, they just move easier. And I think that's because there's a lot more pigment in the Altenew pencils than there is in the Staedtler pencils. So they're a little bit thicker, I guess you'd say. But if you're just starting out, the Staedtler pencils work great. Been using them for a really long time. Now, you do have to make sure that you do this on watercolor paper or cardstock or any kind of cardstock that says it's suitable for watercolor. If you try to just do it like on regular Neenah paper, Neenah Solar White, the 80 pound or even the heavier weight 110 pound, it won't work the same because the watercolor paper actually soaks up the water and then allows the pigment to sit on top, where regular paper is not coated the same. The pigment and the water soak into the paper so it doesn't move. And you don't get the watercolor effect that you're going after. If that makes sense. Okay, I forgot to do his little ears up here. This would be even something fun that you could do with your kids if you've got little kids. I just found out I'm going to be a grandma in July, so I'm looking really forward to being able to do stuff like this with a grandchild. Okay, so while this guy was drying, we did him. I'm not using a lot of water, so I'm pretty sure we're safe to move along. So I'm going to do his little tongue. Otherwise, if you were using a lot of paint here, you would want to either hit it with the heat gun to dry it or let it set and dry. But I think we're okay, because otherwise if this was still wet, if this gray was still wet and I got any of that pink in there, it's going to bleed into that, which is another reason why we have that clear heat emboss on there, because it's helping to keep this in place. But it's not as obvious as it will be when we do the background. Ooh, do his little ears. Little tongue. There. So cute. That's it. That's easy peasy for that. I am going to hit that with a heat gun for a second just to make sure before we start doing the background that it's nice and dry. It's warped a little bit, but that's okay because we're going to cut these hearts out anyway. So now the next thing that I'm going to do is I want to do like a little, I I don't know, like a spacey kind of a background. I wanted it to be really bright and colorful. Again, that's why I'm using these Hydrus colors. Make sure that's in the screen here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to paint. We're going to do what's called a wet and wet technique. And that's when you put wet paint into a wet background. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to paint where I want my color to go with just plain water. And this can be a little bit difficult because you can't really see where the water is. So if you don't get right up next to the edge on your first go round, that's okay. We're just basically trying to get water on the background. And if I don't talk, it's because I'm trying to concentrate. Now, the ridge of the clear heat embossing will help keep this water inside the heart much easier than if there was nothing there. Obviously, because it helps to just puddle it. So when I'm putting the water up against this little guy's ear, it's not moving into the ear. It's staying on the white side of the image, if that makes sense. The key here is to get it evenly wet as much as possible. And if you have to tip it, I don't know, you can see where it needs to be wetter and where it needs to be drier. So where I started over here, it's dried out a little bit, so I'll just go back and I'll put a little bit more water in there. The number one secret, I guess, the thing to know about watercolor is the more water you use, the lighter the color. So instead of taking, like if you wanted pink, instead of taking red and adding white to it, you just use more water. Also, the more water, the more it moves. Now, different watercolor will move in different ways, and that's another reason why I like the Hydrus colors. They're liquid. It's already liquidy. You don't have to add water to it, so you don't have to guess at how much water you're putting in it to see if it's liquidy enough. I'm not even sure if that's the right term to use, it's liquidy. But so now that that's all pretty much the same shine, same wetness everywhere, I'm going to start dropping color in. I'm just going to start with this yellow. Let's see if you can see that. And it's just going to move all on its own. Wherever there's water, the pigment's going to follow it. You see how it just moves up and around like that? I think that's my favorite part of watercolor, is watching to see what it does all by itself without my help. Now I'm going to put red in there. And you see how the paint is staying right where the water is. It's not moving outside of our heart shape, which is the goal. Now, I put that down there. There's not as much water there, so I'm going to go ahead and just put a little bit of water in there. Help that move around. Now I'm using a size 4 round brush here. If you want to use a smaller brush, you can certainly do that. And then that helps get in these tight little spots a little bit easier, but I'm not really that terribly concerned about it. I'm just drying my brush a little bit over here. I'm just tapping to get the majority of the water out. And then I'm just going to hit this with blue. As you can see, this side has dried out a little bit, so I'm going to like I said, if we get into that red, obviously, it's just going to make a purple color. That's what I want, kind of. I'm not really mixing, I'm just trying to get this all the way to the edge here so I don't have any white areas there. And then I'm just going to let that dry all by itself. I'm going to turn the light on here a second. Maybe that's a little bit better. It's getting dark here. Cloudy. I'm just trying to get the edges there. And I'm actually going to put a little bit more red right here. It's not quite as vibrant as I'd like it to be, so I'm going to put more paint, less water. There we go. And I'm going to do the same thing with the yellow over here. A little bit more yellow. Let's see, I touched that right up there. If I don't like that, I can just brush it off. But mess with it too much and you end up ruining it. So now I'm going to go do this little guy down here, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. I apologize right now if I'm not seeing what you're saying in the chat. It's over on my computer off to the side. It's hard for me to concentrate on doing this and looking at the chat at the same time. Like I said before, if you have questions, please ask the questions in the YouTube comments, and I will promise to answer every single one when this is said and done. Now, I don't know if you can see that or not on camera, but this water is dirty from me rinsing my brush, and so it's got a little bit of a color to it, so it helps me to kind of see where my water is. If you want to do that, that's kind of a little trick that you can do as well if you're just starting out and you don't want to keep picking it up and looking at it. See, it's got a little bit of a bluish green color to it, so I can see. It's probably easier for me to see, obviously, than you can, but if you want to just put like load up a tiny bit of paint in your brush and put it in your water and make a little bit of a water or a colored water to do this, you certainly can, because these colors are vibrant enough where it's not gonna matter. And it's not like you're painting roses or anything. We're just painting backgrounds for some little critters. Well, I can see I need to put it around his ear. Do you see here that purple right there? I don't like that, so I'm gonna go up here and put some blue. It's still wet, so I'm just gonna drop it in there. There we go. Okay, so I'm gonna do the same thing with this guy, but I think I'm gonna start with the yellow on this side, just to be different. And my red. Now my brush does have water in it when I pick the paint up. Not a lot, but a little bit. And I'm just dragging that. I don't know if you can see how that moves. Oh, I just love that. I'm easily entertained, obviously. Okay. And then we're going to do the blue over here. Nope, in camera. Keep forgetting that it's zoomed in. There we go. I'm just going to drag that over there and let that mix together all by itself. I'm actually going to pull it down a little bit because I don't want any stark lines. I want it to blend nicely. And I think my problem is I need some red right here. There we go. You know what? And if you're trying this for the first time or you just don't feel confident, just remember it's just watercolor paper. It's really inexpensive. You're using like you saw me put in 2 drops each of that watercolor, and there's a lot of, you're not wasting anything, I guess is what I'm saying. What you're doing is you're learning how the products work. You're learning what you can do with them, and it's worth spend a little time, I think. Always happy accidents. Now let's see. Now I'm just going to put some water here and let that move down. And I'm going to put a little bit more blue up here because I want this to be dark, because we're going to put little stars back there. And you can move it around if you want, but I'm just going to set this aside and I'm going to let this dry on its own. There's 2 reasons why I'm doing that. One, because I'm going to move along and do something else, so I don't really need to hurry up and dry it with a heat gun. I'm going to zoom back out now. The second reason is when you have wet paint like this and you want it to move on its own, how this is moving in here like that, if you take a heat gun to it, it's going to push it around. And I kind of like what it's doing all by itself, so that's why I'm just going to set it aside and let it dry on its own and move on to the next thing. So the next thing I'm going to do is use another Simon Says stamp set. This one's called Birthday Word Mix. And basically what it is it's a stamp set that has all different kinds of birthday sentiments, all different shapes and sizes. But this is one stamp and this is one stamp. And then it comes with a die that you put over that whole thing, and it cuts all of those out. So even though you only want 1 or 2 of these, every time you do it, you'll have spare sentiments. So let me move this paint out of the way. I'm going to do a little bit more stamping. Okay, so let me get my Misty back out. And I'm going to use a piece of Neenah Solar White, the heavier 110 pound, because this is going to be my sentiments, and so I want it to be a little bit sturdy. And I want to use this Hope. This is the sentiment that I want. So I'm going to do this whole thing here. And it's going to give me some other sentiments along with it, which is good. I'm just going to set that there. And I'm going to end up heat embossing this with the clear again because I want it to be shiny, like the little critters. Using the VersaFine again. Nope, need to do that again. And there's the beauty of using a stamping platform, because you can stamp it over and over again without fear. Oh, get my little thing out of the way. Without fear of not lining it up right. I'll be honest with you, I've always had a stamping platform. It was one of the first things I bought when I first started doing cards, and I can't imagine. I know a lot of you have been making cards and doing scrapbooking and stuff for a really long time. I can't imagine doing it without a stamp platform. Okay, that looks good. So let me get my little deli sheet out. We're going to use the same, I don't know if I showed you before, it's just this Wow embossing powder. I really like it. It's super fine. Doesn't take a ton of heat to heat up, so it melts really fast. And you can get it in that giant jar, which is always a plus. Okay, heat up my heat gun a little bit. And there we got all of those neat little sentiments. Now, one thing I will say is with VersaFine ink, your stamps won't come perfectly clean. That bothers you, you can always get some stamp cleaner and clean them off every now and then. But if you're pretty diligent in wiping them off every time, they won't get really filthy. All right, let's put this back. And stay diligent about putting your stamps away, because that's how you lose them. Trust me. Okay, so let me get my little Spellbinders die cutting machine. I'm sure you can see that. Let me zoom out a little bit more. Okay, and then I'm going to use some purple tape. The purple tape is just called the purple tape because that's just what it is. It's purple, but it's low tack. That's like medium tack. So when you stick it on your cardstock and run it through your die cutting machine, it won't tear your paper if you're careful. So that's why I'm using this. Now, they don't always turn out. You have to be kind of fiddly with it to make it line up so everything cuts perfectly. And they don't always, but I don't mind that. My main goal right now is I want to use this little U-Rock, the Make-A-Wish, and this right here. So I'm just making sure that those ones are straight. Or the Make-A-Wish and the Hope Your Everyday one. And then whatever else I get that ends up being straight is just bonus material. And I'll save them in a little bin. Okay. Run that through. So that's the one I want. Perfect. And then I want this little U-Rock guy. Perfect. Make-A-Wish. And then I will save. And that one actually turned out really good too, so I could use that one if I wanted to. But I'm just going to put them in. I have a little container where I keep all of these little, aren't they just adorable? I love the little tiny things. They actually all turned out quite good, which that doesn't always happen, so that makes me happy. Okay, so I'm going to set those aside for other projects. Oh, there's another one. They think to be a card maker, you have to be sort of kind of a hoarder. Because it's hard to throw the good stuff away. Even if it's a tiny little thing you can make again, it's still hard to throw it away, right? So, like, I'm going to save that piece of cardstock because I can use it for something else. Okay, so while I've got my die cut machine out, I'm going to die cut these other things. Well, we're still waiting for our little paint guy. You see how that did that? I'm not sure I like that. So I'm going to get my paintbrush. I'm going to see if I can fix that with some yellow. I might just not have as much yellow paint. It's going to end up going to be an orange probably instead, which is fine. Just work with what you got, right? That looks better than a... I'll be honest with you. In real life, I would probably do that one again. In real life, this is real life, but I mean, if I was just in here by myself, not on the clock, not boring you guys to death, I would just do this one again. Actually, I have another one that I did when I was practicing. I might use that one for a card. I usually do end up making 3 or 4 of everything, just in case, because you never know. Okay, back to what I was doing before. I'm going to cut out the words love you, this tiny little thing right here. And I'm going to do that out of some more Neenah 110 pound, because I like the dimension that it gives me. So, now I could run that whole piece of paper. I guess I should explain why I do some of the things that I do. I could just stick this on here and run that whole thing through my machine, but then any little flecks of dirt or paper or whatever gets smushed into the cardstock, and so then that ruins that piece of cardstock for me. So I'm going to just cut off the little pieces that I want to use as I go. That's why I do that. There's that. And I'm going to cut... I'm going to do 3 of these, I think. It looks like I've got paint on my cutting plate. I'm going to see if I can try to keep this under an hour, or close to an hour. We'll see. If I stop yip-yapping, trying to fix mistakes. Let's save that for later. These little holes on the back, in case you didn't know, the little holes on the back of your dies are to help poke out those pieces of, I almost said fabric, those pieces of paper. Used to be a quilter. I guess I am still a quilter, I just don't quilt anymore. That's the fabric reference. Okay. Those aren't ready to cut out with that yet, but I am going to cut out these little hearts out of some black glitter scrap, which I have here somewhere. I'm just going to cut these out. A little bit of bling. I love blingy things, but I don't think little boys do so much. But a little bit. Kind of looks like, I don't know, asphalt or something. Not too sparkly, but it satisfies my little need for glitter. Okay, we'll set those aside. Let's see, what else do I need to cut? I'm gonna use, we're gonna make square cards. So I'm gonna use, these are Sizzix square frames. I looked online for the supply list and I actually can't find these anywhere. So I linked to, I think it's a waffle flower set, which is actually even better than this one. There's more sizes. But this, instead of cutting just the squares, it cuts these little frames and the squares. And I'm going to use both. So I'm going to cut with the biggest one, which would be the 4 1/4. I'm going to cut out of black glitter. And I'm actually only going to use the frame, so I'll have a square that I can use for another project. So that's garbage. So I've got the square, which I don't need to use, so I'll save that for later, but I am going to use, where's my pick? The frame. I don't want to stretch it, so I'm going to set that aside. And then I'm going to use the next size down. I'm going to cut just out of plain black cardstock. I'm going to use, oops, both of these. I'm going to use this frame and, whoa, the frame and the square for this one. Scrap. So I'm actually, you'll see when I put it together. Okay, and I think that's all I need to cut out. So I'm gonna put my machine away. Well, actually I have to cut out the little guys. So let's see if these guys are ready. I'm gonna hit them with a heat gun a second. Okay, so I lied. Let me bring this back. So I'm going to cut all of these out. I actually even practiced doing the little stars in the background. I think these guys are cute too. So I'm going to go ahead and cut all of them out, and then I'll decide which ones I want to use for the cards. So bear with me a minute. I'm going to use tape again. I can only do one at a time because obviously I only have one die. I suppose if you had some kind of a machine that allowed you to cut out more than one, you could do a bunch of them. So there's that guy. There's the same tape. Maybe. I can already tell that I'm probably not going to use these ones. Part of the reason is because, you know, when you're working by yourself, well, I'll be honest, I was super nervous today. So I think I just whipped through these. Where when you're working by yourself, you can take your time. I can put my face right up next to it without the fear of getting my hair in the camera, which happens a lot. So the other ones that I did previously, I think just turned out a little bit better, but I wanted to show you how it worked. Ooh, it's like wet paint. We don't want that. But you know, I probably could go back and put more paint on those. Or if you're doing Valentine's for your kids or something, kids aren't going to care. They're going to go, look at that cute little kitty with that colorful background. But of course, being an artist, you want it to be as nice as possible, right? I'm trying not to get the tape on my actual painted part. It's just on the outside edges to hold that down, because in case it does stick a little bit, you don't want it pulling that paper off, or pulling off the paper where the ink is, or the paint. Yeah, I know what I'm trying to say. Yeah, I can already tell he's a cutie. Probably should have had these cut out earlier. I wouldn't have to do it, bore you to death with the die cutting. If I end up doing more of these lives, I'm going to figure out surprisingly how complicated the tech is to do this. But I'd like to be able to use some software I can talk to you while I'm working instead of the way that it is right now. It's not very conducive for that. Okay. Probably won't use the watercolor paper again, so put that away. Put the little love you away so I don't lose these tiny little die pieces. Put these away. And now, put this away again. For real this time. Let me look real quick and see if there's any questions. Let's see. Hello from Ohio. Hi, Rebecca. Got a few people watching. No serious questions yet, so that's good. I haven't missed anything. Okay. So, now that all of our parts are cut and ready to go, it's time to assemble. Let's see if we can... Ooh, we might be able to get this done. Okay, so since I'm making square cards, I'm using an 8.5 by 11 sheet, and I'm cutting it 4 1/4 inches this way. So it's 4 1/4 inches. So out of an 8.5 11 sheet, you get 2 of these, and then you get a little piece of a scrap, which is what I use to cut my I love yous out with. And now that I mention that, that's probably what I should do first. It's not really truly assembled yet. We're going to glue these together. Then I'll tell you, then we'll do the cards again, or do the card bases. So let's glue these together real quick. Some people ask me why I use certain glues for certain things. I use liquid glue when I want some time to move things around. I use spray glue, like an Elmer spray glue, if it's a really intricate die cut and I don't, with really thin pieces, and I don't want to stand there and try to put little dots of glue everywhere. Still gives me a little bit of wiggle room time, but not as much as liquid glue. And then I use almost exclusively this art glitter glue that I'm going to show you, because it's really strong and it dries really fast. I like that, so you don't have to let them sit and dry for 100 years. And then I also use multi-matte medium. The difference between these two, they both dry quick, they're both strong. This one dries clear, but it's shiny. This one dries clear and it's not shiny. So if you were going to use this, like I'll probably use this on the black border, maybe, I don't know. So that if it moved around and it got some glue on the background, it would dry, you wouldn't be able to see it where you might see it with this because it's shiny. And I'm also using my little metal tips, which just screw on any, it's got a little thread inside there, and they screw on almost any plastic cap. I do have to get it going. It's an ongoing battle with me and the tips, but it's so worth it. I usually keep them in a plastic container with water. There we go. So that the glue doesn't dry hard inside it. And then every now and then I've got 4 of them. So every now and then I'll go in and I'll clean them all out and set them to dry, and then they're ready to go for the next project. But if you keep it on your glue, if you put a stainless steel straight pen inside, those can be hard to find. Go to a quilting shop, they'll have them. That will keep the hole open, and it shouldn't rust inside there. If you just use a regular straight pen from, the sewing kit that you get at the dollar store, it's going to rust inside there and you're not going to be happy. Gets all yucky in there. Ooh, got quite the glue glob going there. Calm down, metal tip. Squeezing too hard. Okay. Just putting dots. I'm not trying to be fancy. No need to be fancy with glue, especially on white paper. Now, if we were using metal paper or holographic paper, that's a different story. You gotta be more careful, otherwise it leaves fingerprints and all kinds of disaster. Okay, oops. So I'm gonna set this aside while I assemble. I'll get back to what I was trying to do before. But I'm just gonna put some clear block on top of it to keep it flat while it's drying. Okay, back to this. So 8.5 by 11 sheet of Neenah Solar White, 110 pound, cut 4 1/4 by 8.5. And then I will score this at 4 1/4. And that gives us the little square card. Like I said, you end up with a little bit of a scrap, but then you can just use that for sentiments. I used this bone folder that came with my mini scoreboard because it's got a very sharp point, and so it scores nice. I use the Teflon bone folder because it doesn't leave marks on the paper. There's the reason for that. And I also like my cards to lay flat, so I put a little piece of tape rolled up inside there, and then it just lays flat. It's not trying to open up. Almost every video I do, somebody asks me that question. Why do you put tape in there? I also have seen people have conversations about which way to fold that paper, to fold the cardstock. Fold it this way, you scored it now and then you just fold it like this, or do you turn it and fold it that way? Everybody's got their own reason for doing things. I've tried it both ways. I don't see any difference. There's probably some kind of difference because of the way the fibers are with the paper or something. I don't know. When I'm making a card, I can't tell. So I wouldn't stress about that too much. All right, so let's do the first card. First card, we're going to do this black frame on here with one of these little guys. And these, I think. Okay. And my glue's over here being crazy. Dripping all over everywhere. Calm down. Okay. So I'm just gonna put dots. You could use tape if you wanted to, a tape runner. Like a dot runner would work. You just have to be sure to do it on a non-stick surface so that the glue that or the tape that ends up being on your surface back there, it comes off easy. I like the glue because it gives me, like I said, time to move things around before it sticks permanent. Just like that. And then I'm going to use this guy. I'm gonna use those two, I think. We'll set these aside for another time. So I'm gonna lay him flat. Do I want to use glue? Yeah, we'll use glue. I've got it out already. You could pop this up if you wanted to. Oh, so now you're gonna not be, there we go. You could put foam tape or something behind it, but I'm gonna pop up the sentiment. I don't want to do both. So I like having things hang off the edge. So I'm having this hang off the edge of my border here instead of being all inside that little square. I don't know why. There's probably a reason, but I don't know what it is. I just like the way it looks. So I'm going to use some foam squares. These are probably my most favorite foam squares. 3D foam squares. I think I'm all out of the big white ones though, so we'll have to use little ones. I like these because they're crazy sticky. Oh my goodness, they're so sticky. So there's not going to be any fear of these coming off. Plus they're inexpensive. And you can find them, well, you used to be able to actually find them at Hobby Lobby, but I can't find them there anymore. But Simon Says Stamp, scrapbook.com, Joggles, pretty much anywhere you buy scrapbook or scrapbooking and card making supplies, you can get these. I think they're less than $3 for a pack, so it's really a good deal, and they last for a long time. And they come in white and black. I'll use some black ones in a minute. Okay, so I'm going to put this a little bit at an angle. Put it about right there. And move it down a little bit. Whoop. Just don't want to press hard on this. Because once it's on there, it's on there. And then I'll use just a single dot for this. You rock. Every little boy wants to hear that he rocks, right? Rock. I like to hear that I rock, actually. There we go. Cute. Now, to improve this card, I do this with every card. To improve this card, I probably would move this down and then move this down. So these two things were more centered down here. But you know what? I don't hate it. So there's that one. Second one, so it can be a little bit jazzier. You know, I was going to use the matte. If I was gluing this onto a black background, I would definitely use the matte glue because I don't want that to show up, but I'm not worried about it on the white. Because if it's shiny a little bit, it won't be as obvious. Now all of a sudden my glue doesn't want to come out. First it wants to come out too much, now not at all. Okay. Dots. Okay, in case you came in late, I wanted to say again that all of the supplies are on my blog, and I'm almost positive that I put a link to it in the description of this video. So if there's anything that you think you have to have, I will say, and I apologize, I never know until I do the card, that the little critters, little heart critter die set and stamp set at Simon Says Stamp is out of stock, but they get stuff in pretty quick. So if you want them, go there and make sure you have an account set up where I think it's just your email and a password. I'm going to move this a minute. And say that you want them. And you might not even have to have an account. I think you just have to put your email in and say, notify me when they're back in stock, and you'll get an email, and then you can order it then. For some reason, that is not fitting there at the bottom. But you know what? That's okay. I'll trim it. Because that's what we do. We figure out how to make things work, right? Boom. You'll never know. No one will ever know. Okay. Now I'm going to put this inside there, and I'm going to use my advanced tape glider. This is my go-to tape right here. Again, affordable, easy to use. It's kind of a pain in the tush to load, but thank goodness you don't have to do it very often. Super strong. You can get it anywhere. Love my tape runner. So instead of just putting that in there like that, I like stuff being wonky. So I'm gonna put that inside there like that. And then I'll use my little kitty cat. I'm gonna use some black foam squares this time. Ooh, we're almost gonna make the hour, I think. Oh, 5 minutes over. That's okay. Well, let's use my last two big ones here. And I'm gonna lay this out here a second before I stick them down permanent. Let's see, I'm gonna use these little guys. I think I'm gonna pop those up as well. So we'll put him right here. Right there, and then our little love you. Let's see. Kind of like that. Okay. Now if you wanted to, I'm not going to on this one, but if you wanted to, you could put the little stars in. If we were under an hour, I would do it, but maybe next time. To do that, all I did was use some white acrylic paint with a tiny little brush. I used a tiny little brush and I just dotted on there. That's all there is to that. Like that. And we're going to put some glue on here. I could use the matte glue here, but I kind of already know where I'm going to put it, so I'm not going to move it around a lot. So make sure it's pretty straight. Oops, I forgot my guys weren't stuck on. That looks pretty good. Tiny little bit of bling for the card maker. And there's that. Tilt him up a little bit. There. Isn't it cute? So there are the two cards. Stressful. Well, I had a good time. I hope you guys enjoyed yourself. Again, if you have any questions, put them in the YouTube comments and I will answer them right away. Otherwise, make sure and follow me on Instagram at Lady Michelle Creates. If you don't follow me on Facebook, do that as well on the Facebook page. And I might do a live there in the near future. Otherwise, thanks so much. And I will see you guys again soon. Happy New Year.